What did Joe Brady, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, Kaiir Elam, and Curtis Samuel all have to say in their press conferences yesterday? Let's break it all down here on Buffalo Live. Hello everyone and welcome to Buffalo Live, your one-stop shop for live professional play-by-play reaction to every Buffalo Bills game, plus discussion on what our offensive coordinator Joe Brady and these players had to say throughout this entire offseason. Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for joining. I'm your host Kyle here on Buffalo Live, and today we've got a lot to talk about, talking about these press conferences, looking at Curtis Samuel's contract and what kind of impact the Bills expect him to make, consequently, and breaking down some news. So that's what we're going to do first here. It was announced today, I believe, that wide receiver Nico Collins for the Houston Texans received an extension. Just a quick thought on this. Dynamic playmaker. He gets a 3-year, $72.8 million extension. Last year he played in 15 games, caught 80 passes. That was 23rd in the NFL. Top 10 in yardage and touchdowns. So he catches has 1,297 yards receiving, almost 1,300 yards receiving, and 8 touchdowns. That was tied for 8th in the league. So just a dynamic player for the Texans to go along with their young player Tank Dell and now Stefon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon. Super jealous of these weapons that the Texans have. So they're going to extend Collins out of Michigan. The deal is, well, first of all, he's still scheduled to make just $3.1 million this year on that third-round rookie deal. So he's still going to make that. They're going to kick the cash down to next season and the seasons after, which is, by the way, after Stefon Diggs will be a free agent by then. So Diggs is only on that 1-year contract. $24.3 million average annual value. And I looked up his 3-year cash value, makes him the second most expensive wide receiver in the NFL behind A.J. Brown, if he does indeed earn that full value of his contract. So the Texans went out and paid this guy like he's going to be a top 10 receiver for the next 3 years. So back up the Brinks truck for Nico Collins. And that was really all the news I had today. Now, let's talk about these Buffalo Bills. Now, we're going to have a lot to talk about specifically with Joe Brady's press conference because he had an almost 20-minute conversation with the media. So let's talk about that first. First question, he was asked how much more of his spin does he need to put on this offense? The first thing he said, at the end of the day, this is Josh Allen's offense. And by the way, it's always been Josh Allen's offense. I wanted to his response made me want to look up how many games did Diggs really take over? And there's still more research to be done on that, but I did find Diggs' yardage share, receiving-wise, for the past 4 years since he was on the Buffalo Bills. And I wanted to compare that with other wide receivers around the league. I have Tyreek Hill's numbers here as well. He spent 2 years, these past 2 years in Miami, and before that, 2 years in Kansas City. So I have those yardage share percentages to share with you today. So let's talk about him. Stefon Diggs, when he comes to the Buffalo Bills in 2020, he racks in 33.8% of the entire team's yards receiving that year. Okay, so that's pretty high relative to the next couple of years I'm going to talk about. 2021, the next season, goes down 6 percentage points. So he goes down to 27.8% of the yards. By the way, that's still a ton. All right, that means those are numbers for a guy who is your number one wide receiver. So, but drops down 6%, and then in 2022 it goes back up to 33.4, so slightly below what he had in 2020. And then this past season drops back down to 27.5. So if you look at Diggs' yardage share for the past 4 years in Buffalo, started up high, dropped a bit, went back up, and then dropped a bit again. Now let's take a look at Tyreek Hill. And I wanted to bring up Tyreek Hill because he's also been a dominant player in the league. He's had, I think, 2 consecutive seasons with over 1,700 yards, if I'm not mistaken. So, and also they're really close in age. I think Diggs is like 3 or 4 months older than Tyreek Hill. But let's talk about Tyreek Hill's stats. So in 2020, Hill's still on the Chiefs. By the way, he's playing next to a guy named Travis Kelce, future Hall of Famer. Hill's yardage share was 26.3% for his team. Okay, so he's obviously sharing a lot of that with Travis Kelce. And that is lower than any of Diggs' numbers in Buffalo. Next year, Tyreek's yardage share drops a percentage or a half a percentage point to 25.9. And then when he goes to Miami, check this out. It skyrockets. 2022, 37.9% of Miami's passing yards all went to Tyreek Hill. That's higher than any of Stefon Diggs' target share or yardage shares. And then this past season, 39.9% of all Tua's yards went to Tyreek Hill. That is insane. Imagine that. 40% of all your yardage through the air going to one guy. So Diggs, with those numbers in mind, Diggs never took over to the extent that Hill has in Miami. Okay? So maybe that's what he's hoping to do in Houston, but guess what? He's not going to come close to that in Houston. With their weapons, are you kidding me? Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, I've already said them. Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon. I think there's another one, Noah Brown, right? So those guys, I think, are going to really spread the ball. And so if Diggs is hoping to have his yardage share increase, I think he's going to be disappointed. But I say all that to say this. Like Joe Brady said, this is Josh Allen's offense, okay? It was never Stefon Diggs' offense. Of course, he's a talented alpha wide receiver one, but at the end of the day, this is Josh's offense, and I'm excited to see what a offense will look like with Josh Allen when you don't have a guy that you need to devote, more than 25% of your passes to. So, Brady also went on to say, there will be some elements of things that I believe in, but it's more, tell me who we have on our football team and what they can do well, and we're going to do that. He said there's only one guy in the wide receiver room that's even caught a ball from Josh in a game, Khalil Shakir. There's such an intention behind what we're doing and why we're doing it. This is the time right now where we're experimenting with things. Can this guy do this? Can this guy do that? So that kind of response, and this is really the theme of the whole yesterday's media appearances from those offensive guys. This is really an offense that is going to be spread throughout all their players. So I don't really expect there to be a guy who catches or he gets 1,000 yards receiving. If it is, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid. But as far as wide receivers go, I would more so expect 5 guys to have 500 plus yards. And speaking of Kincaid, I think if there is a guy who defenses really target and try and take away, isn't it going to be Kincaid? So we'll talk more about Kincaid later, though. Brady was asked, what are those elements that you believe in? Really thought that he kind of dodged the question a bit. And why would he answer this question? You're basically asking him, like, what special, tricks are you going to throw into this playbook? What's your offensive philosophy? And, he kind of just went vague with it. He said, the most important thing to me is that guys are intelligent football players. When things change in the middle of a play on the field, can they adjust? So that answer to me sounds like they are going to rely on players' acumen more than just, hey, go run this route. And that really makes you think about Ken Dorsey, right? And I think that was a big reason why Ken Dorsey got fired, was because his offense was so focused on choice routes and Josh Allen and his receivers being on the same page always. But the more I thought about it, the question is, maybe did Dorsey not trust his players as much as he expected his players to do this or that? And so what I mean by that is, if my wife, if she wants cheeseburgers for dinner, right? She doesn't bring me home a cow from the farm for me to butcher and prepare, right? She also doesn't go out and just buy McDonald's and say, hey, okay, here are cheeseburgers that you made. She's going to get me the patties with the wrapped piece of plastic, and she trusts me to just do that well, all right? She's not expecting, this handmade, prepared, butchered piece of meat that I'd made myself. She's expecting something realistic. And so there's trust there to run the offense and make decisions, but the expectations for these players are realistic and leveled. I hope that was a good analogy. Maybe it wasn't. Brady also went on to say, in this offense, everyone is going to eat. And that was said a few times yesterday between the players and Joe Brady. Everyone is going to eat. And they've got to have that mindset. It's not just about one person. No one's bigger than the offense. Of course, maybe you could say that about Josh Allen, because this is Josh Allen's offense. But in terms of the weapons here, no one's bigger than the offense. It's in order for someone else to have success, I got to do my job so they have success, and vice versa. That's the biggest thing we're preaching right now. And I really believe he means that when he says they're preaching it. We'll talk about that later with Shakir's interview. So expect guys to run every route hard come August. I fully expect when we see those preseason games that those wide receivers, they're not going to take a playoff. And into the early part of the season, you're trying out guys like maybe Justin Shorter makes the roster, maybe Andy Isabella is running his routes. I fully expect them, if they want to make this team, that they're not going to take any plays off, even if it's a run to the other side. Watch out for those guys on the weak side or on the non-play side to run those go routes as hard as they can. I think that's really what they're trying to ingrain in these guys. So, and expect anyone who's, runs with low effort, maybe that's Chase Claypool, maybe that's someone else on the team, to be cut or sent to the practice squad, because they're just not going to tolerate that. They're not going to be able to tolerate that with this kind of offense and with the lack of, high-tier marquee names on the roster like Stefon Diggs. So he was asked about Stefon Diggs, speaking of, and his departure, and how do you replace all those targets that previously went to Diggs? And I really loved Brady's answer here. He says, you don't just sit there and say you're going to replace a player, replace a scheme, or replace targets. Every year is going to be different. What do these wide receivers do well? Let's find ways to put them in those positions. Right now, we have a lot of newness in that wide receiver room, and there is so much good and so much excitement with it. It's important for us to not focus necessarily on, we have to replace this, we have to replace this. More so, every season and every game is going to be different. The numbers are never going to be the exact same. Let's figure out how we can get our players in the best position to have success. I love this answer. So Brady, he's not focused on Keon Coleman, right? Drafted him at the top of the second round. We have got to get this guy 1,000 yards, and if he doesn't, then we're screwed. That, to me, is a recipe for disaster. And in fact, you think about the back half end of the of last season, how many passes kind of felt forced to Diggs? And how successful were those plays? I remember a lot of plays going to Diggs, a lot of plays with him in the backfield and him given the choice between running this way or that way, a lot of screen passes to him, and it just felt forced, and the offense wasn't really humming because it was, this is the guy we're giving the ball to, the defense knew it, the offense knew it, and it just, I think had a major negative influence on the team. And so that's not to say that having a dog wide receiver one on the team is bad. It's just bad when you and everyone else knows that the ball is going to him and the defense can plan around that. So I really like how Brady understands, hey, I'm going to run an offense here that is not tailored to any one wide receiver or tight end on the team. It's about the entire team and just getting down the field. Love that. He was asked about not having the element of Stefon Diggs and defenses no longer needing to worry about that. He said, only time will tell. You did have to worry about Stefon Diggs, but you also had to worry about Josh Allen. He said that part with a lot of emphasis. It's a quarterback-driven league. We're fortunate that we still have him and that the offense will still run through him. We'll have to adjust. We'll have to get a feel of how teams are playing us. We're a few days in, but we're excited about the group we have. When we get out there on third down situations, we'll be figuring out who they're going to take away and going from there. And I think teams are really in the process of figuring that out themselves. As I alluded to earlier, I really think that Kincaid is the guy that they are going to be most threatened by. He is so shifty. He's a down-the-field threat. He's a guy with great ball skills, and he's a matchup problem. And so I think if there are, if there's a safety that teams are going to use to try and kind of leverage over to one side, I think it's going to be towards Dalton Kincaid. So, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe Keon Coleman develops into that guy we're hoping for. So, next question, he was asked about James Cook's development and the significance of play-action passing. Loved this answer as well. He talked about trying to be as two-dimensional as much as possible. He said, when you're living in a world where you can only run the ball or only throw the ball, eventually it's going to run its course. And this is so obviously true. If you look at teams like Kansas City, Detroit, Baltimore, San Francisco, they were teams that could have success on offense in a number of ways. If you look at the regular season stats, kind of the outliers there might be Baltimore's passing, it might be Kansas City's rushing, but guess what? They were still average across the league. It's not like they were bottom tier. So, there was this trend the past 5 or 6 years, ever since Mahomes really caught onto the scene, that if you wanted to win the Super Bowl, you had to be a passing team. And, I think that might have been true for a little bit, but defenses are game planning so hard for that now that it's swinging back in the other direction. And at the end of the day, you've got to be able to run the ball too. And if you look at how those teams ran throughout the year, especially in the postseason, Detroit, Baltimore, San Francisco, they did it well and they did it successfully. So Brady also went on to say you need to continue to evolve the running success. You can't just pick it up and expect it to work. So love that answer. He was asked about Curtis Samuel's growth. He said sometimes you have a vision for how they were used, but that doesn't mean that's the only way they can be used. So he was trying to say, what you see on tape isn't all what they can do. So expect Brady to use Curtis Samuel in a number of ways this season, whether he plays outside, inside, in the backfield. I'm super excited about what they can do with him on the field. Maybe that's a pseudo 22 personnel, a 32 personnel, send him in motion, orbit motion, triple option action. That's a lot of stuff you can do with Curtis Samuel on the field because of how fast he is as a runner, his vision as a runner, plenty of snaps taken as a running back, whether it was at Ohio State or Carolina or in Washington. So love the versatility that Curtis Samuel brings, and it sounds like Brady does as well. He was asked about drafting Keon Coleman. He said he was sold on the type of person he is, his work ethic, play style. He said he has a skill set they felt they didn't have in the room. And he also mentioned, and this has repeatedly been brought up ever since the Bills drafted Coleman by guys like Sean McDermott or Josh Allen, that he is extremely hardworking. There's been this narrative about Keon Coleman that he's just a goofy guy. And it seems like everyone on the team is trying to make sure that Bills Mafia and the rest of the NFL knows, hey, this guy is not just a funny guy. When he's on the field, when he's at practice, he is all go, all gas, no brakes. So love to hear that. That's really becoming a common theme with people when they talk about Keon Coleman. When this question was asked, it really made me want to find out Joe Brady's draft history. Now, I use air quotes because obviously Joe Brady is not a general manager. He's not a scout. But I believe that he did have some influence on what the Panthers were going to do. I think he had influence on what LSU, what kind of wide receivers they wanted to bring in while he was there. But it's interesting because in 2020, when Joe Brady was with the Carolina Panthers, they had 7 picks, and this is the year they did not take a single offensive player. So crazy. This is your first year as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, and you're with a new team, new general manager, and they don't do anything to get you the help that you want, for your offense. In the second year, 2021, pretty sure the year before, the Panthers did not have a successful year. They haven't had a successful year in a long time. So now the head coach, the general manager, they're probably all worried about their jobs at this point. So does that decrease the amount of influence that Joe Brady has? Maybe. But in the second round, they end up taking wide receiver Terrance Marshall out of LSU, a guy that Joe Brady worked with. And he's currently just 5th on the depth chart for them right now after being there for 3 years. So not great. And then they took a tackle in the third round out of BYU. He transitioned to guard and is behind a free agent signee. Tommy Tremble they took in the third round. He's a tight end. He's currently the starting tight end, but hasn't really had a whole lot of success there. I think the biggest guy that the Panthers got on the offense while Brady was there was running back Chubba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State, fourth round. He had 902 rushing yards last season. That was good for 20th. So not great, but not bad. He led the team in rushing yards 2 of the last 3 seasons, and so got some good value there. It's kind of makes you think about Ray Davis, and you're hoping that they'll get some good value there as well. Both of those backs are very stocky. Hubbard's a bit taller than Davis is. Davis is only, I think, 5'9". So, but yeah, hoping that Ray Davis can pan out well just as Hubbard did. A few more questions here for Joe Brady. He was asked about Khalil Shakir's role this season. He said he continues to grow. He's getting a feel for defenses and leverages. And he's saw a lot of his evolution last year. He says he's an extremely bright, intelligent player. And then he said this. He said he has a feel for the zone and understanding of man. And it really reminded me, again, of the comparison between him and Cole Beasley. And isn't Khalil Shakir just a better rack version of Cole Beasley? Both these guys, just as Joe Brady said, that feel for the zone in the slot and the understanding of man coverage. Cole Beasley was so good at that. But Cole Beasley's problem was he would catch the ball and then kind of immediately fall down. He never was really slippery, which is the opposite of who Khalil Shakir is as a player. I mean, I don't have to point any further than that touchdown he got from in the wild card round against the Steelers. So, yeah, definitely excited for Khalil Shakir this season. And then finally, Brady was asked about the interim title, or part of his title, dropping, and just, what it means to be a full-time OC again. He said he definitely regrets not getting to know the players more when he was an OC in Carolina. He said that was kind of his biggest mistake. He said, I have a passion for not just drawing up plays, but for coaching and teaching and seeing them part the end zone, rather. And so he said, quote, I didn't do a good enough job at my last stop. This is a good opportunity for me to dive into not just the players, but the person. And that made me think about all the comments we've seen from players on this team about Brady's swagger and just the energy he brings that was brought up in Kincaid's press conference and Shakir's press conference. So I think you can tell that based on that answer, he's really wanting to be more than just X's and O's guy who calls plays on Sundays. He really wants to build that chemistry, that trust with his players. So, and I think that was a dynamic that was probably missing from the offense with Ken Dorsey. So, in conclusion, with Joe Brady's press conference, Josh Allen is the offense. I love that quote. Seeking to invest in the person before the player, love that as well. And just my overall takeaway is that Joe Brady seems up for the challenge for having an offense without an alpha wide receiver one. He's going to use each and every player creatively. He said everyone's going to eat. And you kind of gathered that from Kincaid and Shakir's pressers yesterday as well. And it's just funny how it feels like more focus is on this wide receiver room than there ever has been. Just because you don't really know who's going to be the guy that racks up 800, 900 yards. Is it going to be Coleman or is it going to be Curtis Samuel? Is it going to be Shakir? So we'll see. All right, now let's switch topics into Dalton Kincaid's presser. All right, he was asked about focus. The focus being more on him with Diggs gone and Davis gone. Really a humble answer here. He said, I feel we have quite a bit of weapons on offense. So I wouldn't say I'm the guy. And the offense is going to go through so many people this year, it's going to help everyone out. We're going to open everyone up. With Josh back there, he's going to get everyone the ball. And then he also did mention he does expect to get a couple more targets this year. So it's interesting. It's not like Kincaid is someone who is assuming the offense goes through him or demanding that the offense goes through him, unlike other players in the league. He was asked about year 2 in this offseason. not being a rookie anymore, not having to prepare for the draft or the combine. He said he's not injured this time around. He was having to watch everyone last season. And he said it's been fun. Multiple times he said it's been fun. So, you get the sense there that he is just grateful to compete with his teammates and not be injured this time. He put a big emphasis for him this offseason on getting stronger, faster, changing his diet, and being in the weight room a lot more. He said, I'd like to come in a little bit heavier this year. He also went on to talk about, being pressed and that kind of being an area of focus this offseason, working through press coverage and man coverage. I think this is a huge area for Kincaid to focus on. If he's not able to get past, nickelbacks and safeties and edge rushers that are trying to chip him and slow him down, then they're going to be able to take him away. And so he's got to be able to be strong enough to, swipe that stuff away and continue on with his route and be a significant contributor to this offense. Because I know Josh Allen wants him to be that. I know Joe Brady wants him to be that. So, love to hear how he is hoping to bulk up. Khalil Shakir's presser. All right, so he was asked about being the only wide receiver to have caught a pass from Josh Allen last year. He said the wide receiver room is completely different. Everybody vibes. He said he's trying to help as much as he can so we can all get on the same page. And he said multiple times, what goes around comes around. So he's not worried about getting the ball just like Kincaid isn't. And I thought this was a great question. He was asked whether he felt the ball was forced to Stefon Diggs last year. And he really had nothing but praises for Stefon Diggs. He said he was one of the best receivers in the league. But there's always a certain point where it all works together if we're spreading the ball around, because then that gets him open, or that gets me open, or that gets someone else open. And so this leads into the next question, asked about Joe Brady saying everybody's going to eat. He said that's the mentality they'll tell us all the time. Whether that's you're running a route, you get to go, you got to clear for your buddy who's running an out route. What goes around comes around. So similar sentiment to Kincaid. And then he was asked what he has seen from Keon Coleman. He said he's an animal. It starts with his mentality. Every time he touches the field, he's on go mode. So yet again, another time where the Bills are but just making it clear, like this is not just someone who's goofing off at practice. No, he's on go mode all the time at practice. So in conclusion about Shakir and Kincaid's pressers, neither of them really seem like they're going to selfishly insist on getting the ball. It doesn't really seem like it's in either of their DNAs, so that's great. Next interview, Kaiir Elam. I'm going to preface this by saying Elam, to me, has always seemed like a quiet guy. He's always seemed like a guy who is not really one for the cameras, right? So he was asked how he's approaching year 3, whether his mindset is the same or different. And I'm just going to read this verbatim. And again, I want to say this is not a guy who's really one for the cameras, and so take that as you will. He said, I mean, yeah, my mindset is definitely different. My mindset is just to continue to get better like always. I absolutely felt like he just didn't know how to respond. Felt like he was kind of convincing himself and trying to find the correct answer of what to say. So it was definitely kind of an awkward response. And it really doesn't matter, how he answers this, right? If his mindset is the same, then that's okay. As long as you're trying to, as he said, always get better, that's your great answer. I think the most important thing is, man, are you out there trying to compete for a starting job? Because that's what Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich want to see him doing, is really competing every single play, not assuming that he's going to be given anything as a first-round pick, not assuming that they're going to pick up his 5th-year deal or give him an extension. That's the kind of answer you want to see. But yeah, I don't think Elam is really sure how to respond to that. During Elam's, it was like a 5-minute interview, he used the phrase playing free 6 separate times. So I definitely feel like that's the element he feels he's missing, is just playing free. He brought up Christian Benford when asked about their new DB coach and how he's coaching the two of them. And to me, that tells me he is still focused on competing for a starting job. So I love to see that. You don't want him to settle for playing in a backup role. That would be bad. So yeah, he was asked also how he adjusts from being a first-round pick and appreciating the struggles of what he's been through. He said, I work hard. There's no doubt about it. Nobody would say differently. I believe in myself, and it's just a part of life. I pride myself in staying resilient. So again, I just think he's a little insecure. I think he hears the things that have been said about him online and on TV, and he's disappointed. And he wants to prove to everyone that he is still a guy who can compete for a starting job in the NFL. He was asked whether he's always been positive, and I appreciated this answer he had. He said, I'm not going to lie, I've never been through anything like this. I'm not going to sit here and say I've gone through this my whole life. He said, outside of football, yes, been through this adversity or similar adversities, but in football, I've always been kind of the best player on the team, and isn't that the case for pretty much every guy in the NFL? So appreciate that honesty from him, and I think it, like he mentioned, is building him into the man he is today. And who knows, maybe year 3 is the year that Elam brings it all together. I really hope it is. It's okay to root for Elam. I think Bills fans are kind of fully on the Benford wagon. That's good, right? He's played well. But it's also okay to root for Elam. And let me tell you why. I looked up their relative athletic scores, and Elam slightly edges Benford in several categories. When you talk about speed, when you talk about vertical, Elam is faster and can jump higher than Benford. Now, Benford does have a slightly longer wingspan and handspan than Elam. He's also stronger than Elam. But when you also factor in the idea that the Bills are paying Elam to be a first-round pick, they've got an opportunity to execute a fifth-year decision on that contract. You don't want to pay a guy a ton of money and not see the return on value there. So it's okay to hope that Elam can win that starting job, and then you have, decisions to make. Do you want to just stick with Benford? Can you trade Elam? Can you trade Benford? So that was Kaiir Elam's presser, and then I want to close with Curtis Samuel. Now, guess what? I did not really hear anything super significant in Curtis Samuel's interview. I listened to every one of these pressers multiple times, and I kind of just got the feeling that Curtis Samuel's really comfortable in this offense, similar to Kincaid and Shakir again, that he's not going to insist on the ball. Instead, what I'd like to talk about with Curtis Samuel is his contract and whether or not we can glean, how much the Bills are expecting him to contribute to this offense with that. So, first of all, I'm going to start with some stats about Samuel. He's 27 years old. Last year, he racked up 613 yards for the Commanders. That was 65th in the NFL. So, good for a bottom-tier second wide receiver on a team. He had 4 touchdowns, 5 total touchdowns. He had 1 on the ground. 62 receptions, that was good for 52nd in the NFL. 9.9 average yards per catch. That was 98th in the NFL, so he's definitely used more down low, shallow crossers and in the backfield. And 38.3 yards per game, which is a little bit more than Elijah Moore and 2.5 more yards than Reynolds. So it was about a yard more than Elijah Moore and almost 3 yards more than Josh Reynolds. Now, I bring those guys up because I want to take a look at how they did and their contracts. Elijah Moore is still just 24 years old. Very similar stats to Shakir. Now, how is Cleveland compensating Elijah Moore? Well, this year in total cash, he's going to get paid $3.1 million. That's 56th most expensive among wide receivers. And he has an average salary of $2.2 million. Now let's look at Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds, similar amount of yardage, 29 years old, so a bit older than Samuel and Moore. And he just got a new contract from Denver. 2 years, $9 million, so that's a total cash this year of $4.5 million. That's 47th most expensive. So that is about half of what the Bills are paying Samuel. Let that sink in. Average salary, $4.5 million. Again, that a little under half of what the Bills are paying Samuel. So let's take that and bear in mind that when NFL contracts get given to players, it's not about what you've done in the past, it's what they're expecting you to do in the future. So if you look at Samuel's contract and you compare it to guys that are paid at that level in the wide receiver market, one guy that's fairly close in terms of total cash is Adam Thielen. 4-year contract, I think it was 3 years ago, $64.2 million. And so, again, if Thielen was given this contract to or from the Panthers, I don't think it was 4 years ago, I think it was probably 2 or 3, then the salary cap is different, right? The market's been reset a few times by then, so take that in mind. Thielen's total cash this year is $8.3 million, so that's just below what Samuel's going to make. And stats-wise, Thielen had 103 receptions. That was tied for 10th. 1,014 yards. That was tied for 26th in the NFL. And 4 touchdowns. So with all that in mind, and those are just a few guys that I brought up. Definitely could venture to compare a few more guys statistically and contract-wise. I'd definitely be interested to see more comps. But it really makes me feel like we are undervaluing Samuel's role on the offense. Feels like everyone's kind of pegging him for 500 yards. But if you look at, guys with similar production and guys with similar compensation, I think we should be expecting Samuel to be an even bigger part. I'm thinking even 800 yards, 700 yards up there will be what the Bills are really pushing him in this offense. So that's going to do it for this edition of Buffalo Live. What did you think about Joe Brady's presser, Dalton Kincaid's, Khalil Shakir's, Kaiir Elam's? What stood out to you? What gets you excited? What did you make of Kaiir Elam and just kind of that, I don't know if you picked up the tone that I did, but just, kind of unsure of how to respond to these questions. What did you make of that? Is that a concern to you or not? Let me know in the comments. Coming soon, we're going to have that Detroit Lions deep dive. Still working on that, dissecting the film there. But if you enjoyed this video, would you please like? It would help out the channel so much. And if you want to see more, subscribe. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching Buffalo Live. Go Bills, and God bless.